Playoff race in the East is getting tighter, so we look at Miami's chances to keep climbing up the standings and how they stack up against the field and West. Based on some recent statements from Zach Lowe, are we being too harsh on the Heat?
Us? Here? Never.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Join the Cookie Gang and become an everydayer. That means subscribing, tuning in every day, Monday through Friday, and signing up for the Everydayer Club with the link in the show notes. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On NBA Daily and Real GM Radio. I'm here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. We are zooming out on the entire Eastern Conference today. We're going to look at where the Miami Heat stand relative to the rest of the East in this play-in mix. And I do think that when you look at where the Heat are compared to some of the teams around them, we might be being too critical of this Heat team. And I'm going to tell you why I say that. I was listening to the Lowe Post this morning, and Zach Lowe and Mo Dakhil, who both of whom I respect very much. I have Mo Dakhil on Real GM Radio all the time. I really respect their opinions, and so I'm tuning into this show, and they're talking about the East play-in race, and they're going through all the teams that are there, starting with Philadelphia all the way down to Atlanta, and we're going to do the same thing a little bit later in this show. They had really good things to say about the Miami Heat and how the Heat are playing right now. Zach Lowe had a specific stat saying that the Heat, as a team overall, have outscored their opponents by 200 points in total this season. He said, quote, "That's a real team," end quote. And both of them seem pretty bullish on the Heat. And I'm wondering now if people here locally have been a little too negative about this team. Because you talk to people I'm talking to people before the game, even last night, media members, people that, all different sorts of people, kind of just feeling like this is it, like this is just sort of the team and we're kind of marching towards nowhere here. And yet I hear a different perspective from people who aren't as entrenched in things here, and they have more positive things to say about the team. What do you think about all that?
I think to answer the question for being too harsh, I'm going to give the really, really tough answer right here. Yes and no. And the reason I say that is because I will say we're not being too harsh, because we do see this team very closely. We see their foibles much more acutely than Zach does. To say that, we cover all these games. We watch them. We know what the team is like. We've seen them fail from time to time. We've seen them not step up and not have that sense of urgency. We've seen mismanagement of the roster to some degree from Eric Spoelstra. All the things that we've talked about in terms of what might make this season a little bit more disappointing. And I think it's only fair that because we see all these games, like a lot of our fans do, we see their issues much more closely. And look, we cover the league. We know what it's like. We can't see every game. We don't see. At this point in time, every team has played 50-something games. I know there are teams I've seen maybe a handful of times over the course of the season, as much as I hate to admit it. It's just the truth. And so you kind of try to pick things here and there, statistics, recent exhibitions, as any news stories that might come up, and you kind of use those to maybe create a bigger sense of what's happening, a bigger picture kind of view of what this team might be like. But you can't see every game, and you don't see all these things that are happening on a day-to-day basis, like the people who cover the team specifically. And that being the case, I think we're not being harsh. But yes, in the sense that maybe we're not seeing that bigger picture, because I think that's fair. Because I think if you just come down from an outsider's perspective, like Zach does, and say, well, let me look at the Heat. Watched 6 of their games this year, let's say, maybe 10, They try to watch as many of these games as possible. You watch these games, you go, you know what? Bam's still pretty good. Norm Powell, he's an all-star. Dali Hero's back. That's good. Andrew Wiggins, he's been a player in a championship team, and on and on. The positives that come with this team. You look at those general statistics regarding their defensive efficiency. You look at what they're able to generate offensively. You look at some of the numbers recently on a 2-game win streak. Those are all positives. And so when you look at the bigger picture, the team is better than what we say they are, but it's also why we say what we do, in that they're not living up to expectations. As I said most recently on the podcast, I think that there probably should be about 5 games better than where they are right now in their record. They should be the 6th seed, if not the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference standings. And so I think it's a combination of those two, where you could say, yeah, they're a much better team than they should be. And also from our perspective as local media that cover this team, they're not good enough. They have not been good enough and lived up to their expectations for what this group is capable of being.
So you did answer yes and no, and I do agree with both points that you're saying here. I do think that there is a little bit of the forest of the trees situation that happens, not just with us, but everybody in any market, right? When you cover a team, you do tend to maybe drill down in some of the negatives if you're going to be a little bit more critical of a team, where other people who are sort of parachuting in either don't notice those things or a lot of times just gloss over them and say, hey, I watched the entire league. What you think is a big deal, kind of happening everywhere. It's not that big of a deal. It's the point I make about injuries all the time. Fan bases, oh, well, we were hurt. Guess what? Every team's freaking hurt. The good teams get over their injuries and win despite them, right? And the Heat have had years where they won despite their injuries, and they've been up and down during. They've had Tyler Hero missed most of this season. They've had other injuries that they've been dealing with this year, and they've won games with injured players, and they've lost games with injured players this year. But I do have a few stats for you that I do think, again, they're right about where I expected them to be, and maybe the road to getting to this point. And this might be why it's been harder to analyze them this year. The road to getting to this endpoint was not what I expected, but they are kind of right where I expected them to be, fighting for the 6th seed. So I don't know that they have failed to live up to my expectations, and that's, everybody's got their own set of expectations. But here's a few stats that I think are important to at least point out here. The Heat right now have a plus 3.2 point differential. I like to go by point differential a little bit more than I like to go by record. Now, record obviously matters when we're talking about the final standings and what your ultimate path in the playoffs is going to, or if you make the playoffs at all, right? And that very much matters for this Miami Heat team. And to your point, David, their point differential is that of one with more wins than this Heat team has currently. So I think you do have a point that maybe this team did drop a few games that they probably shouldn't have, but at the same time, they are better than what their record is. Their plus 3.2 point differential is better than teams in front of them like Orlando. It's better than Philly. It's better than Toronto. It's closer to Cleveland, who's the 4th seed with 39 wins, than it is Toronto, who's the 5th seed with 35 wins, right? Miami, qualitatively, is closer to being the Cleveland Cavaliers than it is the Toronto Raptors. Both teams ahead of them in the standings, firmly in the playoffs picture here in the East. But one, Cleveland, is considered a team that could potentially win the Eastern Conference. While Toronto is a nice story, but nobody thinks they can win the conference. The Heat are closer to that team, the team that can win the East. And I think that's interesting, just by point differential. And that point differential isn't everything, but I do think it is, and it is historically a very instructive stat. I have a few more for you. The Heat are 4th in defensive rating. 4th, okay? That's a real defense. That is an elite defense. And by the way, they've been top 5 for the last 2 months. They haven't wavered from that. This is a better defense than they've had in a very long time. And Bam and Kel'el Ware and Andrew Wiggins in particular, and Davion Mitchell, are the backbone of an elite defense that's better than anything that they've had since 2022. This is a real defense, not a smoke and mirrors defense. This is a real defense that gets stops, gets defensive rebounds, and plays well on a night-to-night basis. They're 15th in offensive rating for the season. That might not sound awesome, especially when you're like 15th in offensive rating, but the broadcast says they're number 1 in points per game. They are, but I don't care. And efficiency is a stat that smart people use. 15th in offensive rating is middle of the pack, but considering that this team had been in the bottom 10 in offensive rating for the last 3 or 4 years, to be average is a huge win. And I think that means that this new offense, as frustrating as it has been at times, has worked. Because I think if you look at this personnel, about average is about as good as maybe you could hope that this offense is. And that's where it is. I think they've maxed out what they could be offensively. They're 11th in net rating overall. They're almost a top 10 team in overall net rating. Last stat here, and then I'll get off the numbers. Over their last 10 games, the Heat are 6th in offensive rating, 6th in defensive rating, 6th overall in net rating. And yet locally, it feels like this is the perception of this team is negative. This team is trending in the right direction. If you zoom out a little bit and look at the overall trends, this is a team playing its best basketball at the right time?
I think that last stat is a noteworthy one because coming out of the All-Star break, I think both you and I were pretty convinced that this team would continue to get better because of the injury situation clarifying, because they had shown some kind of understanding of what's at stake here over the last 20-something games of the year. And so I totally get that. But, even as I'm listening to the stats, and look, you and I both know the stats can be picked and chosen to kind of fit whatever story you want to tell. And that's fine. I think that this team is better in some regards and certainly better than they've been in the past in certain regards. But I was also looking at our schedule, and I could point to at least a handful of games that Miami should have won.
Absolutely.
Games against Utah, games against
But
Milwaukee.
everybody's got those.
That's fair.
The Thunder
You're
have
absolutely
those.
right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. They've got those games. But where are the games in the opposite direction? Where are the games that they probably shouldn't have won?
They beat
and
Detroit.
did?
They beat Detroit. They beat Denver. They have good wins this year. They beat the Thunder.
Detroit was 4 starters down after Nikola Jokic got hurt. That's not.
The
I mean,
Nuggets.
that counts. That counts, and it doesn't count. That's a heavily
Okay.
asterisk game, in my opinion.
Very
Other
fair.
than that, I don't think they've managed to beat the good teams. Like Houston, that's as good a team, and that was a team that's kind of feels like it's
They're
just
third in the
disarray to
West. That's a
some
good
extent.
win. I don't want to hear any complaint. Like Houston's got its own weird locker room vibes. That
Right.
team wins a lot of games.
Yeah. I just think that there's more of those losses there. You go, wow, they really should have gotten that one. As
I don't
opposed
know.
to,
They
wow,
beat-
what a great win.
They got a win over the Thunder this year. Like that Pistons win is a real win. I don't know. I think they've got some good wins on the resume. I think, again, sometimes we locally just get bogged down in some of the negatives because we think that this team is immune to the things that these other teams in the league also deal with. And I don't know. It's interesting. There's one more stat that I wanna get to, and I think it backs up your point, David, specifically. We're gonna talk about that. We're also gonna zoom out to how the Heat stack up to the other teams that they're dealing with here in the play-in race in the East. We'll do that after this here on Locked On Heat. Stay tuned.
Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. With 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like Confetti Craze, Fruity Rainbow, or Cotton Candy. There's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number one pick for the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. Look, and when it comes to my taste, there's only one number one for me, and that's cherry. Like the cherry flavor is the classic. You know what you're getting with it, and it always lives up to those expectations. It's got a great, clean flavor, really smooth. It's a classic, and I love the color. I love the slight tart edge, but it's got that great punchy taste to kind of complement it too. So that's, to me, my number one. But some of these other flavors, I got to be honest with you, I've talked about strawberry banana. That's a good one. I know some people like the strawberry watermelon, even though it's not for me. Blue raspberry is one we talked about. I think you were a big fan of that one. But as far as I'm concerned, I got to stick with my number one pick, and that's where I go with cherry all the way. But you know what? Let us know in the comments who you think should be the number one pick, because 5 Hour Energy gives you the boost with zero sugar. It's got a lot of great flavors coming up, and you know what? The ones that they already have right now are so great. You will find one that's right for you. Find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available online at 5 Hour Energy or Amazon.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. And that's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast, without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. You just pull up the Game Time app, you pick an upcoming NBA game, and you get tickets locked in within minutes. And you'll love seeing the all-in price up front. That's such a great feature. No hidden fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're paying for. You can, if you're going to a venue that you've never been to for a concert, a comedy show, whatever it is that you're looking for, you'll see the seats that you get to sit from once you pick those tickets. That's such a great thing. So you have an unobstructed view of the court, the field, the stage, whatever it is that you are going to, you'll see exactly where you're going to. And they've got the best prices available up to their last minute deals right at tip off. You get the best prices available for all these NBA games. And right now, this is when the NBA season's heating up, and you don't want to miss out on the action. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON. You get $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, It's gametime.co, not .com. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Being part of the Cookie Gang and becoming an everydayer comes with some great perks, including ad-free shows. Plus, if you join the all-access tier, you get even more, including text message updates, like running game notes, injury news, and transaction rumors around the trade deadline, draft, and offseason, all sent directly to you via text. You'll also get a chance to text us questions for post-game shows. And if you're interested in being part of the Cookie Gang and joining the Everydayer Club, you can tap the link in the show notes or head to lockedonheat.supercast.com to learn more. One last stat that I want to throw your way, David, here, and I think it backs up your point overall that this team is probably a few wins worse than where they should be. They have a point differential of a 38-win team. They're currently a 33-win team, but that plus 3.2, that is the point differential of a 38-win team, which means that, again, you are closer to Cleveland at 39 wins. You can look at the Western Conference and compare, right? Denver has 38 wins. Minnesota has 39 wins, right? These are teams that we talk about in terms of championship contenders. Maybe the outer circle of championship contenders, but contenders nonetheless.
Right.
And I do, you could look at it in two ways, right? You could look at it in the sense of, boy, the Heat really left some meat on the bone so far in the regular season, and they should be better than what their record is right now. But at the same time, you can look at it and be like, boy, the Heat are better than what their record is right now, right? You can kind of look at it both ways. I think this is a good maybe point to jump off and zoom out and look at the Eastern Conference in general and where the Heat stand in this play-in mix, right? So, we could talk about how close they are to teams like Detroit, Boston, New York, and Cleveland, but we won't really know until and if they play those teams in the playoffs. Toronto is clearly the 5th seed. Whatever, that they're there. Philadelphia at 33-28 is just a half game up on Orlando and Miami for that 6th spot. That 6th seed is still in play for the Heat, right? They are one loss behind Philadelphia right now. That is very much in the realm of possibility. And you could argue that Miami might be the favorite to get that 6th spot. They do have to pass Orlando in record because Orlando owns the tiebreaker outright with Miami because of the head-to-head matchups. And then you've got Charlotte behind Miami by 2 games, and then Atlanta 2 games behind Miami as well. We could talk about Charlotte here as a team that's trending up. But Charlotte at a plus 3.4, Miami at a plus 3.2 in point differential. Those teams are about the same. And I think clearly the 2 best teams in the mix of the teams that we're talking about right here. But, I mean, let's start at Philadelphia at that 6th spot. What do you think about Miami's chances of catching them?
I think they should be looking even past them. I think they should try to catch the Raptors for the 5th seed, right? I mean, that's certainly attainable.
Ooh. So there are 3 losses behind Toronto in the loss column. It's a lot of ground to make. It's not impossible, but we got to get to 6 before we get to 5th. But I hear your point.
But, I mean, they're 5-5 of the last 10, so I think they're vulnerable. And I haven't checked in with them lately. Obviously, they've had a very good season, and Brandon Ingram hasn't been an all-star, et cetera. So, I mean, they certainly have a strong case to make for hanging on to that 5th seed. I know they've got a feisty defense, et cetera. But at the same time, if you do look at Miami and if you do use that statistics that you pointed out, and this team should be better, now is the time when they prove it and they can continue to stack up those wins to try and climb past the 6th seed into that 5th seed, or at least be competing for that. That's the goal, right? You want to be able to stay out of the play-in tournament, and that should be the very minimum of what you're looking to accomplish for the rest of the season. So as far as catching Philadelphia, oh man, I don't know what to make of that Sixers team, because I think they're much better. We just saw them recently. Edgecombe's been great. Maxi's an all-NBA player. Who knows what's going on with Joel Embiid? When he's available and he's engaged, he's still a really solid, productive player.
Embiid's dealing with that rib injury that he suffered against Miami. He's been out. That's something worth monitoring for Philly.
Yeah, you're right. And at the same time, don't you think teams covering those? I mean, people covering those other teams are saying the same thing. It was like, oh, they're without their all-star, Norm Powell. So, I mean, you could look at what Miami's done of late, and they're dealing with their injury issues as well. So it's certainly something that I think has to be monitored. I mean, injuries are going to affect all these teams. Orlando is without Franz Wagner. You can make a strong argument he's their best player, and he hasn't been available for a handful of games. So
and out indefinitely for the Magic too. That's not great. Yeah.
So there's a lot of these teams dealing with these kinds of issues, but whoever's left has to step up. And in the past, I think you were confident about this Miami group maybe when that hierarchy with Jimmy was much more firmly in place, to know that the guys that were stepping up, the Caleb Martins, the Max Struses of the world, they rose to the challenge. I don't know if that's going to be the case now. If the Jaime Hawkises and the other guys on this roster are going to be able to take up the load without Norm Powell and be able to make the kind of push that's necessary for this team to keep getting better and better in the Eastern Conference. So
I think Tyler Hero has stepped into the starting role quite admirably. He's talking after that Brooklyn game. I mean, he's a starter, right? But you know, they're going to stagger Powell and Hero. And so I'm not trying to diminish the loss of Powell. He's going to be out for probably another week here with this groin injury. But if Hero's trending in the right direction, that does a lot in terms of mitigating that risk. Where you look at a team like the Magic, like the answer to missing Franz Wagner has not been and is not more Paolo Banchero, right? That tends. You would think it should be, it ought to be, but it hasn't been, right?
That's
with Philly. You know, Paul George is out for this 20 because of this 25-game bogus suspension that he has to serve, and then Embiid is out. Like that's two major stars, and it kind of feels like maybe that Rose has lost a little bit of whatever that phrase is for Philadelphia.
The bloom is off the rose.
The bloom is off the rose there.
I mean, if it was in Philadelphia, it always smelled like crap anyway. But that's true. More my knock in Philadelphia.
You know, but they started off the season strong, and they were kind of a feel-good story. Still are a feel-good story, to be fair, but they're not. They're kind of going in the wrong direction, right? Yeah. You know, you miss Paul George, and then you miss Embiid, and the margin for error gets really thin now for Philadelphia, and you're starting to see that with some of these. They lost 2 straight games. You're starting to see that here. The team that I think is playing as well as Miami, or better than Miami, frankly, is Charlotte, right? Like they've played like a 50-win team over the last 30 games. That's most of the season. Like that's a real, like they're back now up to 500 after a miserable start. It's an amazing turnaround for the Hornets, and it is the best story in the NBA, and I love watching that team. They're 2 games behind Miami, but when you look at this group, Philly, Orlando, Miami, Charlotte, Atlanta, however they end up finishing, whoever gets the 6th seed obviously makes the playoffs, but 2 or 3 of those teams are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
We just don't know what order, obviously. And the goal, to your point, is obviously to get out of the play-in and not have to do it and do that play-in tournament. But if I'm looking at 3 teams in that group, I don't know how you don't choose the Heat to be at least one of those 3 teams, right? That come out of that Philly, Orlando, Miami, Charlotte, Atlanta group. Obviously, we're not trying to make predictions and guess what the future is going to be here. But if you look at that group as an analyst, how do you not pick Miami to be one of the 3 teams that come out of that group? You'd have to, based on the way that they've played and the way that they're trending.
I think we're kind of overlooking what the Hawks have done too. They've won 4 games in a row. Jonathan Kuminga has been pretty solid, so I think that's certainly
soft schedule. I want to see what Kuminga does against good teams.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, I mean, I think that's, you look at what this Heat team does with their defense, and I guess you can make the argument that because they have that part of their identity.
That's okay. The dog's a big fan of.
And at least that's something. If you have the backbone of a strong defense, much like what we said about this Orlando Magic team over the last couple of years before the addition of Desmond Bane, right? It's like you know what you're getting into. You're going to get into a rock fight with this group. I don't have the same confidence or faith in Miami's defense maybe as I had in Orlando's over the last couple of years, but at least it's something. And because of that, I do like their chances of being one of the teams that climb. I think Philadelphia is most ripe to drop further in the standings. I don't know what Toronto's capable of, and I think the Magic are going to continue to have some issues with whatever it is that they're putting out on the floor too. So I would say Miami and Charlotte are the teams trending in the right direction, with the other 2 teams trending in the wrong direction, and the Hawks is anyone's guess at this point.
Fair enough. We're going to continue this conversation and talk like what should the actual expectations for this Heat team be the rest of the way after this. Stay tuned.
Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old ways of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in the waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve. Well, you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Final thought to close out the episode here. The Heat have 20 games left. They play the Brooklyn Nets on Thursday night. Big game against the Charlotte Hornets on Friday. We are going to learn a lot about this team on Friday against the Hornets on the second night of a back-to-back. Tough spot for Miami, but a game that they're probably going to have to win, especially to hold off Charlotte here in that play-in mix and in the East standings. But 20 games left, David. After our conversation here, what should be the expectations going forward?
I think based on what the rest of their schedule looks like, just doing a quick cursory glance here, there are some tough matchups up ahead. Excuse me. Charlotte certainly being one of them. The Rockets, the Spurs, Cleveland twice, even Philadelphia, Boston, Toronto twice, at Toronto for both those games. So it's not going to be easy. I think if you're a believer in what we've seen of late and what they're capable of, and knowing that Norm's going to come back, it's not optimistic. It's 12-8. I'd be much happier to say they'd go 15-5 over the last 20, but I think 12-8 is much more realistic. And that being the case, I'm not sure if that's good enough to fight for that 5th seed. But that's where I am as far as the 20-game mark. The next 20 games, I think they go 12-8, which is still 4 games over 500. It's something.
That's a 45-win team, right? And this is a team that won 37 games last year, made it out of the
East is better than they should be, and then a lot of people expect them to.
I agree. I agree with that. That's a great point. No, a 45-win team, that's about right. That's about right. You know, this was a team that came into the season. FanDuel had them at 38.5, 39.5 wins, depending on when you got it.
That was ridiculously low. Yeah.
I mean, you and I pointed that out, but then we got on here and was like, what do you think? Well, we both took the over. 45 wins would be the over, and I guess that's right about in that area with the 6 seed. I think that competes for the 6 seed. That's kind of close to it. 12-8 is fine, right? We talked about how soft the schedule was going to be coming out of the All-Star break. This was the softest of the soft part. Now, there's definitely winnable games going forward, but the Heat, I think, have done a good job. You know, dropped some games. We talked about the Utah game, obviously, but overall have done a decent job of maximizing the schedule. Like, they are back in the race for 6 seed. They have padded their point differential. They're starting to get healthy here. And if they get Powell back, maybe they can go on a little bit of a run here. Overall, I think you're about right for what the expectations should be. It should be to get that 6 seed, right? However many wins that ends up being, chasing and getting that 6 seed. That, to me, is the expectation. And then at that point, I think you have to look at, you know, what is that 3-6 matchup? Is it Boston? Is it New York? Is it Cleveland that you're playing? And then really competing with one of those teams. The Heat will not be favored in that series, obviously. And I don't think they have a player on the roster who's capable of elevating their game to a level like we've seen Jimmy Butler do in the past and knock off a team. But, like, I mean, would it be all that shocking? I don't think anybody looks at those. Like, we obviously see these teams as the top teams in the East, but I don't think we also look at them with fear, right? Crazy things happen. But I do think that the expectation should be to get 6 and really compete in a way that you did not compete last year against the Cavs when you got historically swept. And that's sort of where I kind of want to end this on is we get so bogged down in the day-to-day with the Heat sometimes that we kind of forget it's been a year since they traded Jimmy Butler and had to redo this entire thing on the fly. And the fact that at this stage, post Jimmy Butler, exiting an era where Jimmy was the identity of that team, you have a new identity, which is strong defense and this offense, good players on the roster, good young players that people around the league feel pretty good about, even though none of them are going to become a superstar, but you feel good about them as, hey, those are rotation level players for a good basketball team. Finding a bunch of those kind of guys in the middle of the first round, that's a win. That's not easy to do. Look at the Milwaukee Bucks. They haven't gotten a single draft pick right in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And like the Heat have not been picking in the top 10. So, you know, I do think that those are sort of the expectations is, all right, like, let's take a step back here and just try to say, hey, you know what? It could be a lot worse. And it has been a lot worse for the Heat after guys like LeBron and Dwayne Wade and these guys have left. It hasn't always been great. And it's not awesome right now, but
it's better.
It's better than I think a lot of people anticipated. In fact, it is better than a lot of people anticipated based on on the Vegas over-under there.
Yeah. I think when you look at most teams and the departure of a superstar, I don't think it's a stretch or a hot take to say they usually get a lot worse.
Yeah.
So Miami went through that stretch last year. We talked a number of times about the emotional hangover facing that team. Just dealing with the whole saga was not easy to deal with, and as such, that might have been what we saw from them in the playoffs. It was a team that was just like, I don't have anything left to fight. I don't have anything left to give, and I'm just kind of done with this whole season.
Yep.
Burn it, scatter the ashes, get it away from me as far and as fast as you can. This year started off with a lot of expectations. This is where I think that a lot of the fans, and perhaps myself, I'm a little conflicted, is because it started off with higher expectations, at least locally, and from me specifically. And looking at what this team was capable of early on and thinking, you know what, they could be better. And now we've seen those kind of games where they've lost, but that's all I want for them is to kind of prove it. Like, beat the teams that are beatable, the Washingtons, etc. When you face those teams, beat them. And then get a win or two against a quality team that convinces me that you are better than what your record has been up to this point. And I don't think that's an unfair expectation.
It is not at all, right? And they have some of those, to your point, they have some of those games on the schedule coming up. Friday against Charlotte, in Charlotte, second night back-to-back. That is nut crunch time, right? That is, hey, if you're serious, you go into Charlotte and you win that game. So really easy to sit here and being like, maybe we've been too critical of the Heat after they beat the tanking Brooklyn Nets and have another game against the Brooklyn Nets on Thursday. I'm fully aware of when we're having this conversation and the irony in that. Go win that game against Charlotte. Yeah. Go win that game against Charlotte. That's a really good chance to prove it. We'll talk to you guys all before then. Obviously, thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Heat. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Heat so you get all the latest episodes. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Join the Cookie Gang, get Locked On Heat ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonheat.supercast.com to join the club.